Hey everyone, Spicy Toast Gaming here. Hope you're having a great day, and I hope this video can make it a little bit better for you. We have a very special video for you today. We have our level 30 build guide for every single champion in the game. So what we're going to be doing is going through every single champion, all 65 of them, and listing off some of the best builds. Now, for some champions, we will be listing builds that include the paid relics, but we will let you know any builds that include that. We'll also be having epic relic builds for most champions, and then we will also be doing a rare relic build for every single champion as well. Now, during the video, in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, you can kind of see the prerequisites for all the different builds. We'll say there if the build includes a paid relic, or if the build is tailored for someone's 6-star or 5-star, or if this is just a rare relic only build, but we're kind of expecting you're level 30 or 3 stars. Now, since we have so many champions to get through, and since we have so many builds for all the different champions to get through, we will be trying to go through this very quickly, so we're not really going to be explaining each of the build very much. Now, we'll try to put timestamps down below for all of the champions, so if you want to see a specific champion, go ahead and go there. Also, we have guides and gameplay videos for all of these champions and for pretty much every single build we're going to be looking for. So if you want a further in-depth explanation of any of this, definitely go ahead and check out any of those videos. We have tons of content up on the channel. Now, if you do enjoy this video, if it helps you out at all, this video takes a long time to make, and it's just taking longer and longer because they keep adding more champions and more builds. So going through and trying to get a video like this done takes a lot of time and effort. So anything you can do to support the video is greatly appreciated. All right, let's get right into the builds. All right, so up first, we have Aatrox with a epic relic build, Beast Within stack deck, and Black Shield. This is all about just supporting all of your units and letting them all scale up. Really nice passive build for our Aatrox. Next up, then, we have a rare relic only build. So great for getting your Aatrox on the board and helping him get his champion spell going and gain some great scaling from that Berserker's Buckle. Then we also have a Starforged build. This is normally my go-to for Aatrox. I think it works out really well for him, but it is a paid relic, and if you don't have the Beast Within, you could also swap that out for the stacked deck. Next, taking a look at Ahri. This is my go-to rare relic build for her. Still pretty solid. You don't get as many strikes off as you do with your 6-star, obviously, but still very solid, powerful build. Next up, then, we have her relic, her epic relic, and this is a good build to focus on scaling up your Ahri, but also scaling on your units and just using them to really put the pressure on the enemy. And then we also have what's probably her best build, and this is an epic relic build, really good, especially if you have her at the 6 stars. If you don't have 6 stars, you might want to swap out either the Hidden Tome or the Echoing Spirit for a Gatebreaker. Next up, we have Ambessa with her champion relic. I think this is probably the best build with her champion relic. You're able to get her on the board immediately. This is very fun, especially if you just want to focus on your Ambessa and having her scale and really carry the game for you. Next up, then, we have Echoing Found Fortune and Hidden Tome. Great epic relic build to just be able to drop your Ambessa, immediately get out your Legion Marauder, and use them to carry the game for you. Good if you don't want to necessarily focus on just your Ambessa. And then we have a solid rare relic build that should work out quite well for you. Next up for Annie, this is a very good general build that's also utilizing epic relics for you. Now with Annie, there's a lot of builds you can do for specific encounters. We don't have any of those here. This is just a good, solid general build for your Annie. And then here is the alternative if you just need to use your rare relics. Next up, then, we have Ashe. Now this is specifically if you have Ashe at her 6 stars, then you can go for a triple Gatebreaker build, which is a lot of fun. But if you want a little bit more consistency, or you don't want to solely rely on your Ashe, you can also swap out one of the Gatebreakers for like a Beast Within to get that overwhelm. Next up, then, we have a solid epic relic build for you. This does have the Swain paid one, but it's fun putting a lot of pressure on the enemy. You know, to drop your Ashe turn 1 and still put a lot of pressure on the enemy, especially with all the extra copies of Ashe you're going to get. So you're going to get a lot of Frostbites. And then here is a very solid, just rare relic build for you. Now, I still do like getting the Overwhelm, but if you want to solely rely on all the enemy units having Frostbite, you could swap out that bottom Troll King's Crown for something else if you wanted, but I still generally like it. Next up, we have Aurelion Sol. This is your solid rare relic build, especially if you don't have him at the 4 stars yet, so he doesn't play that Skies Descend. The Seaver's Crest pretty much lets you still get that effect off. You just have to manually play it. Crown Guard, great for getting that rally. And then the Z-Drive Prototype, great for trying to get some extra rerolls so you get the right powers, which can really make a big difference for Aurelion. Next up, then, a solid epic relic build for you. Spellweaver's great, giving you guaranteed created cards. And then last up, solid build with the Starforged Gauntlets if you want to have his paid relic. Next up, we have Bard, and Bard is really good with some rare relics. Corrupted Star Fragment, great for scaling up really quickly. Same with the Berserker's Buckle. And then if you want a epic relic build, this one works out quite well for you, really supporting all your units. And then if you want a paid relic, Starforged Gauntlets does work out pretty well for you. Next up, we have Caitlyn. A lot of ways you can build Caitlyn with the rare relics, but you really want to focus on getting some strikes off, so going for like a Stalker's Blade or Gatebreaker. Guardian Angel can be good, especially with the Stalker's Blade. And then the Grand General's Counterplan can be solid for letting you kill your Caitlyn and then drop her again, hopefully every single round, so she can get some more of those strikes off. Another good strike build for you if you don't want to rely on the enemy having units to hit. And then Caitlyn's best build, but it does have a couple paid relics in there. Next up, we have Darius. Great if you want to go for Starforged Gauntlets. Really good for getting that extra starting mana. You need the Starforged and then one relic that's getting you to 2 power, or you could also go for 2 health, but power is better for Darius. But the stack deck, you could swap out for a couple different alternatives there. Next up then, if you want to go for a very passive build for Darius, here's another great build that does have 3 epic relics. And then here is a solid rare relic build for you. Next up then, we have Diana. I think this is just flat out her best build in the game. Really, really good. Lets you put a ton of pressure on air. And she even gives some 6 stars a run for her money with this build. Diana, also really good for Oath the Guardians. So if you want to go for that sort of build, does also work out quite well. And then here's a solid rare relic build for you as well. Next up, we have Ekko. Great with the Starforged Gauntlets. So if you want to go for a paid alternative, here's one that's not too bad. Next up then, another epic relic build. Echoing Spirit, really good for Ekko because it counts as a created card. So then your Ekko is actually a 3 cost. Works out pretty well for you. This is my general go-to for Ekko. And here's a solid rare relic build for you. Next up, we have Elder Dragon, and Elder Dragon is very good once you start getting epic relics on him. This is a paid alternative, does pretty well. If you want to go for some more cost reduction, Disciple of Shadows is great. But if you want to give him a big free attack, then going for the Vi relic is also pretty solid. And then if you just want epic relics, but you don't have any of the paid ones, this is a solid alternative for you. And then for rare relics, I really like just going for a lot of strike relics so that when he hits the board, he can do a lot of damage and help clear it. Next up, we have Elise, and she's actually one of the ones where I think this is a very solid build for her. And this is a rare relic only build, well, including the common relic. But then if you want to go for an epic relic, just throwing on Spirit of the Brew is a great alternative here. This is very, very good. I like that she's a champion that actually uses all the different tiers of relics, and it's not actually just a triple epic build. Next up, we have Evelynn, and this is the rare relic build for you. All the relics that are about when you level. And then if you want to go for a paid one, Starforged Gauntlets, this is very nice for you. Tempest Blade, so good. And then if you want to go for another paid relic with the actual Evelynn relic, this is a great option. And while we don't have it listed here as a alternative, just going for Echoing Spirit instead of the Siren's Call is a good alternative if you want to be able to still play some epic relics on your Evelynn, but you don't quite have her paid relic. For Fiddlesticks, I really like going for this sort of rare relic build, just going for a lot of strikes, or also throwing on a Overwhelm to help you finish off the games. But if you don't want to go for the strike relics, this is also a solid one to help you close out as well. Then for epic relics, going for a very passive build for your Fiddlesticks, because having him can be a little bit inconsistent. This is a good one if you don't have any of the paid relics. If you do have paid relics though, this one uses 3 of them and is probably his strongest build. Next up, we have Garen. I really like going for double strike relics and crown guard so that when you drop him, he immediately rallies. Really nice for helping you close out the game. And then for epic relics, going for a passive build just to buff up all your units is quite nice. Then if you do have a Starforge, you can actually use it on Garen, which is pretty good. Next up, we have Gnar. This is my go-to build form. I think it works out really well. If you don't have the Swain Raven army though, then going for the stack deck is a decent alternative, and it is a relic that isn't paid. And then for a rare relic build, this is my go-to for Gnar. Next up, we have Gwen, and this is her best build, especially if you do have her at the 6 stars. This is my go-to for that. But even without the 6 stars, this can be a pretty solid one. You don't have to be at 6 stars for this to work. It lets you put a ton of pressure on. Just make sure you're putting enough damage to be able to end with your attacks. Otherwise, your Gwen is going to get shuffled back into your deck. But if you just have rare relics and you're at level 30 with 3 stars, this is the go-to build for Gwen and is very, very good. Next up, we have Heimerdinger. This is my go-to build form for rare relics. Pretty solid for you. And then for epic relics, You're going to see this build fairly often. Great one for just trying to support all of your units. And then for paid relics, you also have to have him at 5 stars. But this is the go-to build for Heimerdinger. So good being able to get him on the board immediately. Next up, we have Illaoi, and with Illaoi, there's actually a lot of flexibility. The most important is having your Crown Guard, and then something to be able to help your tentacles. So the Blade Rack and the Shade Leaf are great there. If you also want to go for like an Overwhelm Relic or a Stat Relic, any of those are fine. Really though, for Illaoi, the most important is that Crown Guard. And then for Epic Relics, another good build for you. Again, Crown Guard still staying in there, so solid. But then Spirit of the Buru and Black Shield to try to support all your units. And then finally for paid relics, going for that Starforged Gauntlets is fantastic. Next up then we have Jack. This is a solid rare relic build for you, helping you get some more scaling and also get a lot of extra damage going. Then as far as epic relics, this can be a fun one again to really help your scaling with your Jack. And then last up, paid relics, Starforged Gauntlets, excellent for you. And all of these, as you're noticing, are trying to utilize that Grand General's counter plan. Jack really struggles with having enough cards to play, so that is great for trying to mitigate that. Next up, we have Janna. Here's a solid rare relic build. It can take a little bit to get going, but once you get that Chemtech duplicator online, she really starts blasting. She's a ton of removal, so this can be very solid for you. Janna is one that also is pretty good with that Oath of the Guardians, so if you want a epic relic, she is one that can work there. And then last up, the next, if you want a full triple epic relic build, here is one that is pretty good for you. But my favorite build for Janna is actually using the Pack Powder and Swain Raven army together to get her on the board immediately, and then going for that Found Fortune. And if you need to, you could also swap that out for the Echoing Spirit. Next up, we have a solid build for Jayce, utilizing his paid relic. Another solid build for Jayce is this right here. Now with that Disciple of Shadows, it is nice that you can get him on the board turn 1. Now for that one, you do need to have him at the 4 stars. But if you're also just looking for a solid rare relic alternative, you can just swap that out for the Crown Guard and it'll also be pretty good for you. Taking a look at Jax now, I am also doing this on a different day, so if everything or if anything is slightly off, that is why. So taking a look at Jax though, for a rare relic build, this is one that I really like to go with. Jax is pretty good with that Crown Guard inheritance because all of his scaling is based on attacks, but then also buffing up all of your units with the Blade Rack and the Crown Guard, also pretty nice. And this is a solid rare relic build for you. Do know with Jax though, he's very versatile, so there's a lot of different ways you can play him, so definitely go ahead and experiment with him. As far as another build that can work out pretty well for you and does utilize at least one of the rare relics of Beast Within, this is Gale Force, Crown Guard, and then that Beast Within for the Overwhelm. Now Jax can get Overwhelm when he levels, but this build is about pushing as much damage as possible. So what you do is you attack with Jax, you get that scat attack off, you then attack again. In that second attack, he normally is going to have enough stats to level, giving you a rally. So then you can attack a third time. So this isn't going to work for all encounters, but if you want to just be able to push as much damage as possible, this is really an excellent build for it. And this is great for the monthly challenges. Anytime you see the modifier where every time you strike, double your power, I think it's called Forest Workout. Using this build with Jax will normally let him just one-shot that encounter. Then last up then for another full epic build, going for Black Shield stack deck and Beast Within. Another great one that these are all powers, so you don't have to really rely on your Jax. While he is still really good, this is just helping all of your units be bigger, have that overwhelm, and then also have that protection from the spell shield. Next up then we have Jhin, and Jhin is actually a pretty unique one. For him, I just think this is flat out his best build, and so it's awesome that it's just using rare relics, so we don't actually have any epic builds for him because, in my opinion, it's really not even needed. Next up, we have Jinx. This is also very solid build for her, great to potentially get her on the board turn 1 with that Packed Powder, also great with Arcane since that is kind of her name, at least the powder in that series. But this is solid build for you. And then here's another alternative if you just have the rare relics. Great for being able to try to get her on the board right away with that massive cost reduction. And Plunder is incredibly easy to get off with Jinx because it triggers anytime you play a card. Next up then, we have Kaisa. Now this is a solid paid relic build because it does have that cool experiments there, but just giving your units 4 keywords potentially, which is very, very good. Now this is her best build if you have her at that 6 stars. Otherwise it still can be fine, but this is specifically when you have her at 6 stars. And then this is the go-to rare relic build for her. Next up we have Kayn. I really like going for double strike builds for him so that when you play him he immediately levels, and then you can play him again that round to again get those strikes off. Having the extra damage makes it more likely for Kayn to actually get kills and start scaling, so the extra stats there is pretty good. If you want to go for a paid relic though, Starforged and the Strength of Stone can pair pretty well together here. And then my general go-to build is still using the double Stalker's Blade, but this time with the Found Fortune. Since you can play Kayn twice in a single round, he gets 4 strikes off, and then he draws 2 great cards and reduces them down to 0. So this is my go-to Kayn build. Next up, we have Kindred. Great to be able to utilize that Starforged Gauntlets, even though it is a paid relic. And then with Kindred, you really can utilize a lot of the summon effects. So going for the Guardian Angel, and then either going for multiple Everfrost, or you can go for multiple Stalker's Blade, really depending on the encounter. So while going for the Everfrost is solid, also going for double Stalker's Blade, if you need a lot of removal, can be pretty good for you. Next up, we have Leblanc, and with her, you can go for the triple Guardian Orb, but if you throw on that Echoing Spirit, it is actually pretty good, because since you have more Leblancs in your deck, she is more likely to get hit with the Guardian Orbs, so throwing on the Echoing, if you have it, is a great option for her. Can also go for the Oath of the Guardians build, also pretty fun for you. And then going for the double Stalkers with the Death's Foil is also very solid, since your ephemeral copies won't die while they're attacking, but they will still get those strikes off. Next up, we have Lee Sin. This is a solid rare relic build to go for him. Sadly, with Lee Sin, there's just too many issues that he needs solved with his relic. So I really have not found any one good solid build for him, because while this is trying to address some of his weaknesses, he just has too many weaknesses to get fully covered with his relics, sadly. But if you want to go for the paid relic build, Starforged Gauntlets is really nice, being able to get that +1 starting mana. Next up, we have Leona. This is a awesome rare relic only build for you to utilize with her. And then for epic relics, this is really good. Passive build, helping you get a lot of units, but Found Fortune, great for Leona to guarantee you pull out your Ravoon. And then this is what I think is probably her best build. Starforged Gauntlets, great getting extra mana, but still having that Found Fortune to pull out your Ravoon, quite helpful. Next up, we have Lillia, and she's another one of those champions that really like summon effects, so similar to like the Kindred or LeBlanc. So going for the Stalker's Blade here is solid. Echoing is great to get multiple copies of your Lillia. Next up then for Lillia, this is a very good build, potentially the best build for her, but you do have to have her at 6 stars so you can actually get the multiple copies of her going. But if you want to just go for rare relics, you don't necessarily want to put all 3 of these together, although you can. Really, you just want to pick whatever ones you need for the specific encounter. So a lot of removal for the Stalker's Blade, a lot of control for the Everfrost, or if you like the kind of randomness aspect of the Guardian Orbs, you can just throw on a couple of those. Next up then, we have Lux. Here's a solid rare relic build for her if you want to focus on your Lux. Then here we have a really good passive build for her that does utilize the epic relics. And then here, if you want to go for the paid relic route, you can have fun getting 4 starting mana with your Lux. For Lux Illuminated, here's a great build utilizing, again, her specific paid relic. Here's another great build utilizing the epic relics, but none of the ones that are paid. And then here is a very good rare relic build for you. Next up then, we have Master Yi, who got a massive buff, being reduced down to just the 2 mana mark. So here's a very solid rare relic build for you. And then similar to Diana, I think this is the best build for your Master Yi, utilizing those triple epic relics, but none of them are paid ones, which is very nice. Then here we have Misfortune utilizing her Shock and Awe. I think this is probably her best build overall. If you don't have her specific epic relic though, going for this one right here with those Echoing Spirit and Found Fortune can be a lot of fun. You specifically want to cut the 2-cost card that is not your Make It Rain, so you're always going to draw your Make It Rain and give it a epic item. And then here's a solid rare relic build for you. Next up, we have Mordekaiser, and he does pretty well with some of the rare relics. This is the rare relic build I would go for with the Mordekaiser. Here's a epic relic alternative. And then here is what I think is just the best Mordekaiser build overall, but it does utilize that Starforged Gauntlets. Next up, we have Morgana, and again, I think this is her best build overall, but it does utilize that Swain Relic. But if you want to go for an epic relic only build, this one will be a good alternative for you. And then as far as rare relics, I like to go for this right here. I know some people like the Chemtech Duplicator, but I prefer going for the Scourge's Stash here just to try to get her on the board a little bit earlier, since she is your main way you're able to control the board. Next Next up then we have Nami. Now this is a great one for Nami, although do note that if you are consistently ending games before you hit that 6 mana for the Chemtech duplicator, you will want to swap that out, potentially for like some chase guns. But until that time, Chemtech duplicator is fantastic for you. This is my go-to build for Nami. You're able to level up in the first round, just put a ton of pressure on the enemy, works out actually really well. And here we have Nasus, solid rare relic build for you, trying to get him on the board early and then really scale up all your champions with his siphoning strike. But you can also just go for a whole bunch of strikes with your Nasus. It does actually work out pretty well to help him scale up even further and potentially level him as soon as you play him. But he is another one that's just going for the full-on passive power build to scale up all your units and protect them. Does work out pretty well. Lastly though, my go-to build for Nasus is this right here. Again, trying to just scale up all of your champions from a bunch of siphoning strikes and trying to get your Nasus on the board a little bit earlier can be quite a lot of fun, especially if you just get a little bit lucky. Next up, we have Neeko, and she is another one of the champions that can utilize a Guardian Orb for just some crazy scaling. But you can also go for a build like this to try to really focus on your units and scaling up your Neeko herself. Next up then, we have Nidalee, and Nidalee is actually very good just with your rare relics, especially Crown Guard and Lost Chapter. Now, Transmogulator is solid, but you could also swap that out for the Overwhelm, as you see right there. And then if you want to, you can also swap out the Crown Guard for that Spectral Scissors if you want a epic relic version of it. All right, next up we have Neela. Now, just so you know, I am recording this on a different day, so if some of the settings are slightly different or if my voice sounds different, that is why. But for Neela, this is a nice kind of rare and also kind of epic build for her. The Hidden Tome is a direct upgrade over the Lost Chapter, but if you don't have that Hidden Tome, just throw on a Lost Chapter and that is perfectly fine. This is kind of my go-to build for Neela. Loose Cannon's Payloads works really well at discarding a bunch of cards, works great with your second star power to get you a whole bunch of fleeting cards then for the rest of the match, and with the Corrupted Star Fragment, really good to turn Neela into your win condition. The Hidden Tome or Lost Chapter, nice to be able to immediately play at least one of those pows, and overall this works out pretty well. If you don't have that though, Neela is also pretty good with Oath of the Guardians because she has so much extra draw that you should be able to go and get some of those extra units you're shuffling into your deck. And then if they're able to get fleeting when you play them, you could then end up with 2 massive champions. This is another one that can work out pretty well for you. And then last up, for another rare relic build, this one is solid. While I think using things like the Grand General's Counterplan or the Gravedigger Spade isn't necessarily as good as the Jinx relic, I think it also works. Now note with the Grand General's Counterplan, you can use this to play the fleeting copy of Neela, but if you don't play that card, then it'll get, remember, discarded, put back into your deck, and you'll just draw another fleeting card at the next round start. So that plus the Gravedigger Spade is a great way to just get more fleeting cards. You can consistently benefit from her doubling effect of those fleeting cards. Next up, we have Nora. Nora is very good, especially with a lot of the support relics. So if you want a rare relic only build, this one is pretty fun for your Nora. But if you want a epic relic build, here's one that actually utilizes her paid relic, and this can be pretty good for you. And then last up, another build that utilizes a lot of the support relics, this time 3 of them with the Spectral Scissors in there. This one is great for putting a ton of pressure on the enemy very early. Next up, we have Ornn, and Ornn is one that does a lot better with the epic relics. Here is a solid rare relic build for you, but he is one that really likes getting those epics. So here's a very fun build for him. Going for that Gale Force and the Spectral Scissors, you're able to put a ton of pressure on the enemy, each your first ram with your scout attack, essentially doubling your stats so that the next time you attack, it is even bigger. A lot of fun for just putting a ton of pressure on the enemy as soon as you drop your Ornn. But then probably his best build, really utilizing that Starforged Gauntlets and the Death's Foil and Spectre Scissors actually work quite well for you as well. Next up then, we have Pyke. This is a great one to try to utilize a paid relic form, getting him on the board right away. Really fun if you really want to focus on your Pyke and having him on the board throughout the entire game. But here's one that really utilizes his specific relic. So that Deadly Harpoon can be pretty good for you. This is solid if you want to go for a lot of those deaths from below. The spell he can transform into when he lurks. So this is solid, but if you don't have his paid relic, also going for the Echoing works pretty much just as good to try to utilize the same playstyle. If you just have rare relics though, I like going for the Double Stalkers and Warhammer, so that when you drop him, he's very likely to level and just start wiping the enemy board. Next up then, we have Samira, and I think this is actually her best build. Yes, if you have the Beast Within, swapping that out for Troll King's Crown is nice, but honestly doesn't make that big of a difference. And I do like that Samira is one of those that pretty much utilizing the rare relics is her best route, but if you want, Oath of the Guardians does also work pretty well for her as well. Next up then, we have Set. This is generally my go-to build, and it's all these rare relics. Works out really well for you. Once he gets on the board and you get that Chem Tech online, he just pushes so much damage. But if you want to go for the Starforged route to get that +1 starting mana, this also is a good alternative. Next up, we have Swain. I think this is just his flat out best build, but it does utilize 2 epic relics, including his specific paid relic. But if you don't have that, going for this right here, these triple rare relics, is also very, very solid. And next up, we have Tahm Kench. This is a pretty good build for him to try to scale him up as much as possible, but then give all your units overwhelm so they can still punch through and end the game fairly quickly. But this is a fantastic build if you want to focus on your units and having them all scale up throughout the course of the game. Cruel Experiments is a paid relic, but if you don't have that, you could also go for the Beast Within. And then last up, another really good build for Tahm Kench, especially if you want to focus just on him. This one is great for that, but it does have 1 paid relic in there. Next up, we have Talia. Here's a solid rare relic build for her. Now, we are expecting you to have her at level 3, so you do have that extra overwhelm. Otherwise, you would probably want to swap out like the Blade Rack for an overwhelm relic if you don't have her at 3 stars, but we're expecting that you do. Next, then, you can go for a Starforged Gauntlet build. Now, until you have her at 6 stars, this is going to be the best build for you. But if you do get Talia at 6 stars, then you can swap out that Crown Guard for the Icon of Val here, the Volibear epic relic, and that'll actually work out quite well for you. Then finally, to finish off, if you want to go for another build focusing on your units overall and really using Talia as just a rally when you drop her, this can work out pretty well for you. Next up, we have Teemo, and Teemo has not been in a good spot for a very long time. Back when they nerfed Gale Force, Teemo has not recovered at all, but he is a 1-cost champion, so he can utilize Oath of the Guardians. He doesn't really have any special synergy with it. It's just he's a 1-cost champion, so it kind of works there. Here's a build you can go for if you want to have your Teemo drop him on the board and scale him up throughout the course of the game. But this is my general go-to build for Teemo, especially for rare relics. Nice that you can get him to level in your first attack. You can then trigger the Crown Guard and then attack again. So you're able to actually put a decent amount of puff caps into the enemy deck turn 1, and Teemo is then leveled, so every time you attack, you're doubling it again. Next up, we have Poro King, and Poro King is one of the champions that is much better with epic relics. Here is kind of a go-to build with the rare relics, but you really want to get epics on him. As you see right here, this is excellent. Spirit of the Buru is really the star of the show when it comes to Poro King, but being able to get another keyword with the Black Shield there, really solid, and then Secret Technique doubles the amount of stats you get from your Poro Snacks. For Thresh, he actually really likes a lot of the rare relics. This one is really good for you, really killing a lot of your own units to further trigger that Succubus brand. So this one is quite solid, but if you want, you could go for a Starforged build for your Thresh, and going for that Disciple of Shadows to try to get him on the board as soon as possible. Overall, though, this is actually my go-to build for Thresh. Nice that he actually utilized 2 rare relics and you're really just using the epic Disciple of Shadows. Next up, we have Varus, and he is actually one of the champions that we only have 1 build for because we think his rare relic build is just the best build for him. Super consistent, definitely can be a bit boring, but really good and lets you end games very quickly. Next up then for Vayne, this is her best build, and it's a great one because it doesn't have any paid relics. Now, I will say for this one with the Hidden Tome, you do want to have her further along in her constellation so that she can get her tumble to go down to a 2 cost. It still works without that. It's just definitely better once you're actually able to get that. With rare relics though, this is a decent alternative for you, but she really does like her epic relics. So definitely try to upgrade her when you get the opportunity. Next up, we have Vhagar. This is the go-to rare relic build. You're trying to get him on the board earlier. He's then giving you the Luden's Tempest to try to buff up your damage. And then Chemtech is a great finisher for you. Can also go for the Pack Powder and Scourge's Stash together to just get him a total cost reduction to 0. So you can drop him again very early on into the game. But this is generally the best build for Vhagar, and is with the Swain paid relic there. So as long as you get your Vhagar in the hand, you can drop him turn 1 and then use the Chemtech duplicator to try to finish off the game. Next up, we have Vex, and this is my go-to build for her. With the Echoing Spirit, really nice because you can get a bunch of her champion spell, make it cost even less, and it gives you consistent draw. This is overall, yeah, my go-to build for her. But if you only have rare relics, this one is actually pretty good. One of the few champions that can also utilize the Jinx relic. Moving on though to Vi, this is actually a very, very fun build. You're dropping Vi and you're making her a 1 cost, So she not only has Challenger and Tough, but she then benefits from the Spirit of the Buru as a 1-cost, getting that Overwhelm, Quick Attack, and Fury. This is a very fun build for Vi. Highly recommend checking it out if you can. But if you want to utilize the Vi specific relic, that Cease and Desist, here is a solid build for that, really focusing on all your units and then dropping your Vi to just get a massive attack in. But if you want a very simple playstyle for Vi, you can definitely go for something like this. The Warhammer is offsetting the reduced stats you're getting from the Gatebreaker, so you can let her scale up to that 10 power and then drop her. She's going to level and just do 20 damage to the enemy nexus, so often just ending the game for you. Next up we have Viego. This is my go-to build for him, works very, very well. You just have to make sure you stay in your Shadow Isles regions for both the Spellweaver and the Portal Pals. As long as you do that, this is absolutely fantastic. But Viego is also pretty good with rare relics, so you can go for this right here. If you wanted, you could swap out the Stalker's Blade for like a Gatebreaker, but I think Stalker's Blade is generally better for you. Next up then we have Volibear, and similar to Elder Dragon, he really likes his epic relics. So this is a solid one if you want to utilize that Starforged Gauntlet. But if you don't have Starforged, you could also swap it out for like a Portal Pals if you just want to go for a full epic relic build without any of the paid ones. But if you want to go for a rare relic build, going for some of the strike relics can be good, but he does already get a strike off from the 2-star, so that's why Gatebreaker can be pretty nice, because if they don't have any extra units for you to strike, you can still hit that Nexus. Luden's Tempest actually works pretty well for your storms, and then Wicked Harvest can be nice for just getting a whole bunch of kills and a ton of sigils so you can drop some more big units. Next up we have Warwick, and this build utilizes his Cruel Experiments. This is often my go-to build for Warwick, and then I just swap out the Black Shield for the Echoing based on whatever adventure I'm going up against. But if you want to go for a full epic relic build without any paid ones, this one works out pretty well. And then if you're looking for rare relics, Stalker's Blade can be pretty nice to get 2 strikes off when you play your Warwick, and pairing that with the Psychics Brand and Corrupted Star Fragment, great to help your Warwick scale up and just get some more units. Psychics Brand is actually pretty fun with Warwick because it benefits a lot from your scaling. Next up we have Yasuo, and this is my go-to build for him, works out very, very well. But if you don't have his specific champion relic, that Windblade, you could also swap it out for something like the Black Shield to further protect all your units. But this one is very nice to have. For a rare relic alternative though, this one is pretty good. I really like that Grand General's counterplan to get a lot of his champion spells, so you can get extra stuns whenever someone is attacking, as well as giving some extra draw as well. Last up then, we have Yuumi. Now for Yuumi, this is the go-to build that I use. Really nice, and then with that Spirit of the Buru, you can go for those keywords, but if you just want to have Overwhelm and a little bit of extra stats on your units, you can also go for that Beast Within. But overall, this works very well for you. But if you want to go for a rare relic only build, this is pretty good, but with Yuumi, you can really tailor it for exactly what you're looking for. Since she just brings over stats as well as keywords, you can really go and look through especially a lot of the common relics and see what keywords you want to bring and what stats you want to look for. In general though, I like Dreams of Yordles the best because it's not only giving you 1/1, and then it's also giving you a keyword as well. And with that Scout, the impact is pretty nice. All right, that's it for the champion guide. We tried to go through these very quickly because we didn't want this video to be crazy long. But if you want more in-depth guides or breakdowns of any of these builds, we have tons of videos and guides for every single champion. But these types of videos do take a long time to put together. So if this helped you at all, a like and subscribe or any way you can support the video would be greatly appreciated. I really hope this helps you, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.